My topic is loving accountably. This is the time of year when we celebrate the Hallmark holiday, widely known as Valentine's Day. Along these lines, having grown up with Hollywood versions of this theme, we tend to idolize the concept of falling in love as an ideal thing that happens between certain lucky people. While in our sanest moments, we know love seldom works out this way. Why do we repeatedly fall into this trap? Part of this is revealed by our neural makeup and brain chemistry. We now know that falling crazy in love in this all-consuming way triggers the same brain chemistry activated in an addiction to cocaine or methamphetamines. Our dopamine system leads us like a moth to the flame, where we are hijacked by our brain chemicals and remain unyielding to reason. We are all acquainted with the honeymoon period, when a person first experiences a total rush amid the depth of feelings toward another. And, as we all know at this stage, love truly is blind to the shortcomings of our intended love object, and that usually no amount of caution or criticism expressed by concerned others has the least effect on the violence of our emotions. This has been proved over and over in my life, as I am the veteran of several serial marriages, though I am not the current record holder among my choir posse members. Thank you. Along the way, I have discovered that loving another person doesn't just happen. Love is not just a feeling. It's an action, a decision, a commitment, and a process. Only after the honeymoon period is over can the possibility of true long-term love begin, with commitment to the relationship. You can't build on the early attraction in a lasting way if you're standing with one foot in the boat and the other on the dock, checking out alternate possibilities. Next, it helps to reinforce loving words with action, pitching in with chores, considering your words before blurting them out at each other, expressing appreciation for love and actions that are directed to you by the other person in your relationship. Make an effort to spend quality time with that other person. This is the continual process of accountability, taking responsibility for your actions and expressing appreciation when kindness is returned in your direction. This is definitely not a one-time thing, but an ongoing process. Then, too, communication and cooperation and compromise are vital. A carefree life with no need to explain or review our actions tends to be a lonely life because no one will want to have you around. What works for me is a regular check-in with those in relationship with me, like, are you okay? What's on your mind today? And then truly listening to the answer. That means really tuning in, not just waiting for your turn to speak. This is harder than you think. I invite you to try it out today. Sit quietly and wait for someone to finish their thought completely. When we are close friends with someone, we tend to finish their sentences for them as a reinforcement of how close we are. This robs the other person of the chance to really express their thoughts and feel heard. It helps me relate to others in this more patient way. When I think of how Mr. Rogers communicated in his habitual, openly interested, and unhurried manner, even if I'm hopping up and down in my seat with the urge to blurt out my thoughts, if the relationship is important to me, I try to channel Mr. Rogers and do it in this way until the fit passes. Time after time, I have found this to be a very effective way to nurture relationships that stand the test of time.
Our first reading today is from the Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford, and it is called To Love the Hell Out of the World. To love the hell out of the world means to love it extravagantly, wastefully, with an overpouring abandon and fervor that sometimes surprises even yourself. That love flows out of you, sometimes slow and steady, sometimes in a torrent, sometimes filled with joy, sometimes fierceness or anger or a heartbreaking pain that makes you say, no, I can't take this anymore, I can't do anymore, it's too much, too much. But it's too late. You've opened up your own heart, your own mind, body, and strength, and yes, it is too much. But there is also so much love that comes crashing down on you. Gifts from the heavens in the form of the smiles and care from others. A giggle burbling up from a toddler's fat belly. The soft, sweet smell of star jasmine catching you unaware, not knowing where it came from. But it's here, and you're here. And just to live, just to exist swells your heart with enough gratitude and love that you must release it or burst. And so you love the hell out of the world again. Without scale, without ratio, without carefully allotting how much you will give versus how much you will receive. You love because you must. And it's the air you breathe in, the water you swim in. It's the rushing in and out of creativity, of self-expression. It's seeing the amazing, amazing, amazing gifts of the people around you. It's loving with awe, with reverence and irreverence, seeing the miracle in a lump of dirt, in a shy hello, in forgiveness. In standing in the shadow and watching the joy of someone else's experiences without you, and yet feeling connected through time and space to all who have been and all who are to be. Our second reading is called Holy, a Polyamorous Blessing by Marcia Stanard. Our love is holy because its abundance knows no bounds and its creativity knows no ends. Because they said we couldn't, and we've always known that we can. Because power over will never teach us more than power through together. Because nuclear is not enough in our queer cosmos. Because you said, go learn what I need, and I still believe you meant it. Because chosen family means choosing who we are together every day. Our love is holy because we are whole alone, but want to be holy together. We are holy. When I was little, I knew my Grandma Marion as a woman who lived in a bed. She had multiple sclerosis back when there were no good treatments, and she was paralyzed from the neck down by the time I was aware of her. She lived in a care center during the week when my grandpa worked, but he brought her home on the weekends and he cared for her at home. He also went to the care center every day after work and fed her dinner and spent time with her. Grandma Marion died when I was 6, and Grandpa remarried a woman named Millie a few months later, and sometime after that, probably when I was a young teenager, I heard the story. The only night that Grandpa didn't go have dinner with Marion was on Wednesday nights, because that was the night that he spent with Millie. The family story, which I tell now because all the parties involved have died, was always told with a bit of a shrug and a sigh. But even as a teenager, it seemed to me that Grandpa didn't do anything wrong. What mattered to me was that he was the best husband that he could be to my grandma. And if that meant that he got some of his own needs for love and companionship met somewhere else, that made sense to me. I trusted that she understood. The second story is my favorite ever coming out story. A young man realized that he was gay, and this being the 1980s, he wanted to tell his parents and let them know this truth about himself. His parents weren't too upset or freaked out or anything. Okay, they said, that's okay. Please just don't tell your grandparents. They're old and it would be too hard for them. But the young man had a really close relationship with his grandparents. He loved them and they loved him, and he didn't want to keep this a secret from him. So he told them, and their response? Great, so are we, just don't tell your parents. I swear to God, this is a true story. Turns out that they had had both a great marriage and an understanding for the last 50 years. For the last several centuries, monogamous heterosexual marriage has been seen as the be-all, end-all of romantic love and romantic relationships. But a sociological and scientific view shows us that marriage as a romantic union is really only an idea that's been part of the culture for the last 200 or so years. According to sociologist Stephanie Kuntz, before the 1800s, marriage was rarely seen as connected with love. Rather, it was seen as a force designed to create ties between families and larger groups. And as she affectionately says, to get the right in-laws. In an era of stricter gender roles, one often needed both a man and a woman to run a household. And in many cultures, monogamy wasn't seen as a requirement of marriage. Marriage wasn't seen as an ideal of love. Until the 1800s, it was most often seen as a necessary method of building society. It's really fascinating to me that dating became common only in the early 20th century as widespread car ownership gave couples privacy, and people could actually date and kiss and even fall in love before getting engaged. What a concept. Marriage may have hit its peak in the post-World War II 1950s. 95% of adults were married in 1960. But by the turn of the 21st century, both divorce and cohabitation were very common. Our ideas about relationships and what constitutes a relationship have shifted greatly. Now, I know that many of you in this congregation have loving, healthy marriages of 50 or 60 years, and that is a fabulous, fabulous thing. But in the same way that it's important to hear other people's stories about race or disability or immigration, today I want to tell some stories about some other forms of love. It wasn't that long ago that being gay was seen as a horrible thing, a sign of a psychological illness. We know that homosexuality has been around for millennia, but what we think of as modern same-gender relationships are actually pretty new. And discrimination absolutely still exists. But more and more people understand and accept that some folks are attracted and some penguins are attracted, to others of their same gender, we kind of get that now. We're kind of there, mostly, some conservative politicians aside. Because same-gender relationships occur among folks of every race and class and background, and it's a lot harder to hate your Aunt Susie. Other stripes of the LGBTQIA rainbow still have a harder time. There is a great deal of conservative pushback against trans folks, with conservatives trying to gain political points by passing bathroom bills and refusing to let families get full health care for their transgender kids. These bills are cruel and unkind, and like abortion bans, try to say that the person and the family who knows best shouldn't be able to access health care. It's paternalism at its worst. When someone tells you what gender they are, your only responsibility is to believe them. And there are more and more folks who are realizing that the binary gender system just doesn't fit who they are. And we need to listen to their stories and their lived experiences. The A of LGBTQIA stands for asexual and aromantic, and that's another orientation that's newer to many of us. In a world that now centers relationships around romantic love and uses sex to sell us everything from beer to cars to clothing, check out the Super Bowl ads, you'll see what I mean. Folks who don't experience sexual desire may seem different, but just like all of the other stripes on the rainbow, they exist. My daughter Mika is proudly asexual. It's an important part of her identity. And it took me a long time to really embrace it. I wasn't mean about it, but I thought maybe she's just not ready for a romantic relationship. My bad. But there are all sorts of families and all sorts of romance. For lots of us, sexuality is an important part of romance, but not for all of us. For lots of us, monogamy is a really important part of romance, but not for all of us. Ethical non-monogamy is a type of relationship wherein partners in a relationship have agreed together in open communication that sexual exclusivity is not required. It's very different from cheating or having an affair because there is communication and consent and everyone knows what's going on. Some couples have different rules around non-monogamy. They might exclusively date as a couple, or folks in a male-female couple may only date folks of the same gender, or folks might only date when someone else is out of town. But the key parts are consent and communication. Polyamory falls under the umbrella of ethical non-monogamy, but it's a little different, because in ethical non-monogamy, there's usually a central relationship and other partners are mostly sexual. But in polyamory, people might date and fall in love with more than one person. A polyamorous relationship can have many different structures, but allows for love and romance between more than two people. It might be that 3 or 4 people all fall in love and live together. It might be that one person is in love with 2 people and lives with one of them or not. It may be that a person dates and loves several folks, some or all of whom might be dating others as well. There are lots of possibilities. I am sure that there are a lot of people here who think that that just sounds exhausting. I barely have time to myself. Who has time to date? And that's a perfectly fine attitude. Non-monogamy is not for everyone. It's probably not even for most folks. But there are a surprising number of people out there who are in polyamorous or ethically non-monogamous relationships, and it feels important to acknowledge that and to honor some of those relationships as well. To tell some of the stories that we haven't heard, and to help us understand some of our friends and neighbors and congregants. Vivian, our office administrator, is in a polyamorous relationship, and she gave me permission to tell you this story. I would never have told you this story without her permission. She has a partner she lives with and is married to, Jay. And she has another partner that she also loves, Amelia. Jay and Amelia are not partners, but they are friends. And Vivian described it to me using the metaphor of opera. Okay, she said, imagine you love the opera. It is your favorite thing. But your partner doesn't like opera. They will grudgingly come along, but they don't like it, and they won't have a good time. You could go by yourself, but it's a thing that you really enjoy doing with someone you love. Polyamory means that you can go to the opera with someone who loves it just as much as you do. In a world where our partners are sometimes supposed to be our best friends, there's a lot of pressure put on partners to do everything together. And often we have different interests and needs. You could have one partner who is a homebody and one who really likes going out. Polyamory means you can get different needs met in different places, and that's not always a bad thing. Communication is crucial in polyamorous relationships, as it is in monogamous relationships. But you have to handle jealousy and negotiate time and boundaries and make sure everyone is on the same page. But honestly, improving your communication is something that's never a bad thing. The website Choosing Therapy lists several benefits of polyamory, including the fact that it improves communication between all parties. It allows people to try new things and experiences. Self-expression is valued and encouraged, and there is lower pressure to meet all of the emotional and physical needs of a partner. There's also something called compersion. Compersion is an experience of genuine joy that a person has knowing their partner is enjoying the company of and experiencing physical and emotional intimacy from other people. Now, most of those things are pretty self-explanatory, but compersion is something that Microsoft Word editing doesn't even know. So what the heck is that? It is, in a sense, a higher form of love, and by higher, I mean that it wants what is best for another person. It fits in with some of our other UU values, like that free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the idea that we all want what is best for each other. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone can or should be non-monogamous. That is a super individual decision. Monogamy can be great. It is what has worked for most people for a really long time. But compersion takes that good feeling that you get when your spouse or partner gets a promotion at work, or is actively involved in a hobby that they really love, or is super excited to make a new friend. That feeling where you're really happy for somebody that you love, not because of anything to do with you, but because they are happy, and extends it in a way that society tells us that we shouldn't do. Because instead of being made uncomfortable or jealous that our partner is happy, we get to be happy for them. Because when one is doing polyamory right, it doesn't hurt anybody else. Because love is not like pie. How many of you have more than one kid? You love them all, I trust. You don't just love the first one, right? You have experienced that you can love more than one child. Love at its best expands. As Reverend Joanna Crawford wrote in a very different context in our first reading, love without scale, without ratio, without carefully allotting how much you will give versus how much you will receive, you love because you must. And it's the air you breathe in, the water you swim in. It's the rushing in and out of creativity, of self-expression. It is seeing the amazing, amazing gifts of people all around you. It is loving with awe, with reverence and irreverence, seeing the miracle in a lump of dirt, in a shy hello, in forgiveness. In standing in the shadow and watching the joy someone else experiences without you. and yet feeling connected through time and space with all who have been and all who will be. Love, my friends, is infinite. Time is not infinite. If one is to love abundantly and accountably, then one must do some honest assessment of one's own capacity. The key in polyamory is to make sure you are spending enough time with both or even all of your partners in a way that works for everybody, and that can be a really tricky balance. But things like focused communication, quality time together, finding ways to stay connected during the day, a good morning text or a good night text, being present to the person in front of you, negotiating boundaries and needs. All of these relationship tips apply equally to folks in monogamous relationships. Like Millie said, really listening to your friend or partner is something that works in every relationship. Negotiating needs and boundaries is important in every relationship. There are many things that we can learn from queer communities who kind of originated new ways of doing relationships. When you couldn't get married, you defined your relationships for yourself. Queer communities teach us the importance of chosen families, how important it is to have a support system and a network, a more flexible view of gender and especially gender roles, not falling into the same old patterns of he takes out the garbage and does the lawn, and she does the dishes and the cooking and the grocery shopping because that's what our grandparents did. What would the world be like if, instead of seeing monogamy as the only option, we decided consciously what relationship structure might work best for us? If we knew that options existed and could be ethical and lived in integrity? What if, as Marcia Stanard said, our love was holy because its abundance knows no bounds and its creativity knows no end? Because chosen family means choosing who we are together every day. However and whoever you love, I invite you to love abundantly and love accountably. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.